Welcome Raider Nation and my champions out there. This video is going to be covering the current status of our salary cap at an individual player level and as a collective, and looking to see where our possible moves could be made this offseason to clear some room, and as well as some unrestricted free agent opportunities. So after researching and pulling some data from overthecap.com, I broke these down by starting position on both sides of the ball as well as key reserves, and each one has a cap number for the 2021 season. Now these numbers reflect if we do cut this player, whether it be a cap savings in yellow or a cap hit in red, before June 1st, per the NFL rules. I also included specialists here and free agents, possible free agents that we might want to re-sign. So let's get into this right now. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball, and we're going to review players which I feel that may or will be cut this season to clear room and to provide upgrades. And the first player I want to talk about is pretty obvious. It's our right tackle, Trent Brown. He's currently a $14 million cap hit, and that would be second to only Derek Carr on the whole team. He's only played 8 games in the past 2 seasons due to a variety of injuries and illnesses. Many are questioning his work ethic and his desire to even want to play football. Coach Gruden was quoted as saying that we've paid him to be the LeBron James of right tackles and that he, quote, just needs to get healthy. I think that's coach speak saying we need to get rid of this guy, to be honest. And again, he's $14 million cap hit. I think we could do much better for much less money. And I think the other player on offense that's definitely not going to be with the team next year will be Tyrell Williams. We signed him last offseason from the Chargers to be our number one. And this was after a year before that where we signed Antonio Brown. So we haven't really had good luck as far as signing offseason wide receivers to be our number one guy. And I think the Raiders did a lot better replacing him with Ruggs Renfro and then the emergence of Nelson Aguilar deep as a deep threat. I don't see Williams staying around, especially for $11.6 million cap hit. I don't think he's anywhere near that value. So unless he would be willing to negotiate that, which I doubt, I think he will be a cap casualty and on a different team next year. I think the only other option on the offensive side of the ball, and I kind of put in either or, would be one of the guards. I think Gabe Jackson's a little overpriced, to be honest. Um, and I think Richie Incognito is a good player, but he'll be 38 when the season starts next year. And he went down for a foot injury, played 2 games. I don't, he might not play at all in the NFL. He might just retire, so he might be going. So I think if the Raiders staff, if they could get Incognito back for another year, I think they would keep him and cut Jackson. But if not, they'd probably keep Jackson for continuity. They don't want to lose too many players on the offensive line. Uh, Plus, they have John Simpson that they drafted last year. I think they'll plug him in at one of those spots. So we either see a savings of 6 or nearly 10 million there. The other option I wanted to talk about on offense, and it's kind of off the board, would be letting Derek Carr go and or Mariota. I think we would. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Gruden loves his quarterbacks, but I wanted to put that on the table because a lot of people keep talking about that, especially with Mariota coming in with Derek Carr being injured in the one game with his groin injury and playing relatively well straight off the bench with no practice reps. It would be a $20 million savings, but again, I think Carr came back the next week knowing that he had to kind of prove himself. And I think he's had a good enough year to stay, to be honest. I think the pieces around this team, especially on the defensive side, are more of an issue than him. As far as free agents go, what I've done was I either put a check mark or an X next to the player's name who I think will either keep or let go in free agency. Um, the only exception is Nelson Aguilar. It's a question mark because I don't think we're going to be able to sign him anywhere near his salary from last year. So that would be a decision that we'll need to make, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on what I think we're going to be doing about that situation. So I think we'd like to keep Devontae Booker as a backup at around that price. And of course, Carlson, he'll probably get a little bit of a bump up, breaking the Raiders' scoring record this year. And Stieg, solid guy. I think we'll keep him as well. On the defensive side of the ball, I've highlighted two players that are currently under contract. Obviously, we're going to be making some major changes here due to the issues we had this year on on the defensive side of the ball. First and foremost would be LaMarcus Joyner. He's nearly a $9 million cap hit, and he is nowhere near that value. I think at best we could get a similar player for much less if we don't necessarily target somebody in free agency or the draft. So I think he'll be a cap casualty. And the other guy I want to talk about as far as contracted players is Carl Nassib. He came in. He's currently a $3.8 million be a cap savings for next year's cap. He was in John Gruden's doghouse for a while. And basically a healthy DMP. He came back. He played a lot better. I think he kind of got his head on straight, so I'm not sure if he's necessarily out the door or not. I really think it's going to be determined on the strategy they want to go as far as this defense and the incoming defensive coordinator. I'll talk about that a little bit later, who I think they're going to get and his schemes and whether or not they want to put more money into that position, especially since they've drafted Cleveland Farrell and Max Crosby here. So that would be a decision that they would need to make, and I think his fate's going to be determined by that. As far as the defensive free agents, and we have a lot of them, which is kind of a good thing since a lot of them underperformed. We'll start with Eric Harris. The number's not bad, but I don't think he's a good enough player to be on the team. He blew a lot of coverages. He would be hot and cold, mostly cold though, and I would kind of move on from here. This is an area of need that I would definitely target either free agency or draft. Jonathan Hankins, okay. I think we could get something similar or better here. We really need a pass rush. We need a pass rushing either end or a defensive tackle or a hybrid, and I'm going to talk about my suggestions for that a little bit later on. But I think he can go as well. Nicholas Morrow, I put a question mark. I think the numbers not bad if we can get him for that. If not, I'm sure we can move on from him. Decent but not great player. Again, it's going to depend on the new incoming defensive coordinator and what kind of scheme he wants. And then I put some reserves here. I put Raekwon McMillan. Again, as far as the number goes, pretty friendly if we can get him for that. Same thing with these backup corners. We might keep one or the other. I don't think we're going to keep both, given the state of the defense itself. So I want to talk a little bit more about the defensive scheme here, and as well as kind of sum up what I think is going to happen as far as our cuts and how we can clear the room, and who I would target in free agency. So this is a summary of what I came up with. We started $15.5 million over the cap, and if we cut the players I said we'd cut, we're not including Carl Nassib. And I took incognito the smaller of the two numbers. Obviously, if we cut Jackson, we'd get about a little over $3 million more. So that would put us at total cuts is a little over $40 million, which give us about $25 million in cap space. I went to spottrack.com, which is a good site as far as not only contracts, but estimated how much the players are going to be looking for in free agency based on their performance from last season. And these are the 5 guys that I think the Raiders are going to be looking at. Obviously Nelson Aguilar since his good season, but I think it's going to be about $6 million to secure him. May is a solid free safety, a playmaker, turnover specialist. Michael Davis from the Chargers, who's emerging behind Chris Harris, who stepped in on injuries and did really well. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Daquan Jones, a big presence on the interior defensive line. And then Leonard Williams from the Giants, who had basically a breakout year. Again, especially on the defensive side, it's going to be, I think it's going to be determined on which defensive coordinator we secure in the offseason and to match his scheme. And I will tell you right now who I think is going to be the guy. He is also the front runner for that position. And that coach is Gus Bradley. He was the defensive coordinator for the Chargers. Last year, they kind of cleaned house, firing Anthony Lynn and company. He really got his claim to fame as the Seattle defensive coordinator on their Super Bowl run, formulating that Legion of Boom. He did end up getting a head coaching job in Jacksonville, where the defense was solid, the offense not so much. And the saga of Blake Bortles continued, so he only lasted a few seasons there before coming back and being a DC. I think this guy, obviously, with the Chargers, their pass defense was ranked 10th. I think it would be a major shot in the arm, especially on the pass defensive side. I think that's his specialty. And based on that, I think he's probably going to target certain free agents that I'll talk about now. Well, the first free agent I want to talk about that we're probably going to secure is Nelson Aguilar. I know he's on the offensive side of the ball. We'll talk about a few defensive players as well. He really earned his stripes this year. First round pick from the Eagles. Never really panned out there. A lot of issues with drops, concentration. I think he's had his resurgence and kind of growing up here with the Raiders. And of course, I've said it before in previous videos, I think the Raiders designed their offense to be a clone of the Kansas City Chiefs. And in that, we need deep threats. That's why we got Ruggs in the draft and this guy as well. Big deep threat receiver. And Carr wants him. I think they all want him. It's only going to be determinant on price. And the next free agent I think is going to be in a Raider uniform next year is Michael Davis. Solid corner. He really came out this year based on injuries in the Chargers secondary as a backup. Seeing uptrends in his tackles and interceptions. Like I said, he had 3 interceptions. He took 1 back for the house. And I think it's a guy Gus Bradley is going to be bringing with him from the Chargers. And the last guy I want to talk about is Leonard Williams. This is a guy who I wanted in the draft in 2015. We ended up taking Amari Cooper. And I like him because he's very versatile. He can play inside and out. And he really came into his own once he got out of off the Jets. And he ended up with 11.5 sacks this year. I think he could be a disruptor. I think the key to this defense, especially on the passing side, obviously, is getting a good pass rush and then securing the corners. And this is a guy who can get some pass rush up the middle, complement Max Crosby. And I think he actually was saying that he wanted to be a Raider during that draft time as well. He's a hometown guy from USC. And I think this would make sense, and it's feasible. They're estimating him to be about an $8 million sign for this year. And I think this is a guy the Raiders should really target. So that's my review of the Raiders here this offseason and the moves I think they're going to make and should make. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Put your comments below what you think the Raiders are going to do this offseason. And subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and you'll get notifications on all my new videos. Thanks for watching, and go Raiders.